It's a pleasure to have you here at Manorama HORTUS, the second edition. As you know, we had the first edition last year. This is the second edition, and we hope to take it forward in the coming years.
Yes, I'm excited to be here, but I had an earlier session at 2 o'clock, which I couldn't make. My apologies, because I was stuck on the drive from Trivandrum to Kochi. And to see this a virtually empty hall is a little disheartening, I have to be honest, because we had a larger crowd in the audience in the afternoon, didn't we?
That's right, yeah.
So it's a pity, but anyway, we'll have to wing this, I suspect.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me here, Mr. Prasannan. I've been a huge fan of yours. Your writings every Sunday is what I look forward to. We should be here next year for your book, and I should be in that seat.
Thank you. But
asking
the discussion now is about you and your book.
Thank you.
So, as you know, Priyambada has recently authored the book, the biography of Swaminathan, whom needs no introduction, but for the formality's sake, I would say one of the greatest scientists that India has produced. And also, we Malayalis, we Kerala are proud that he is from Kerala, from Mangombu in Kuttanad, which is also called the rice bowl of Kerala. Rice bowl of, South India, or rice bowl of Kerala. And he was the one who fathered the Green Revolution, which made Punjab, mainly Punjab, I would say, the wheat bowl of India. So there are a lot of historical connects also that way when we look at it. So we'll look at it, and so we'll hear more from Priyambada about it. So Priyambada, when we look at it, the Green Revolution, so it happened in a very, very most traumatic, one of the most traumatic decades of Indian history. So I'll start, if you say, right from at independence, or right from the time of partition and independence. India was born into a traumatic experience. We had the partition, the bloodbath over that, then there was a war with Pakistan, and of course, in the poverty. The Nehru government, of course, launched the first 5-year plan, which focused on agriculture, but then, of course, it could not meet its target, most of them. And then came the 1962 war. I'm talking of I reached the 60s, the most traumatic decade in my understanding of history. We had the 1962 war, which ended in a, to use a very harsh word, in a defeat, our defeat. So before we could recover from that trauma, Nehru, who had the architect of people say he's the architect of modern India, he passed away. That was another traumatic situation. We had Shastri next succeeding him, and as no sooner could Shastri get into his, the robes, to the robes when we had the 65 war, which was also unexpected. In 65, we somehow or the other, unlike 62, somehow or the other, we just managed to have a sort of a draw, a military draw, not a defeat, nor a big victory, but at the same time, we could stop the Pakistani forces on the tracks, 65. And then, of course, would come the 71 war. So these 3 wars in 9 years, and in between there was a Shastri's death also. 3 wars and 2 deaths, which traumatized India the most. And in between, in that most traumatic decade, came the Green Revolution. So I'm not the right person to talk about it. So Priyambada can explain that in the better context.
Actually, thank you, Mr. Prasannan. Yes, the Green Revolution was born in a time of great famine and great want. We were, when you very rightly pointed out that when we were born in independence, we were cleaved out at a time when there was hunger everywhere. In fact, Professor Swaminathan used to tell me that, on the front pages the day India got independence, you had the famous Tryst with Destiny speech. But if you looked at the bottom of the page, you would have reports of people being hungry. So India was essentially born in hunger. Freedom was achieved, but at the cost of partition and with great hunger, which was everywhere. And of course, the 1960s was a time of a lot of political instability. You had Nehru's death, you had Shastri's death, then you had a short-term interim government until Mrs. Gandhi took over. And what Mrs. Gandhi inherited was essentially a massive problem, a bleeding public exchequer, very little money, and hungry mouths to feed everywhere. What we did in the 1960s was nothing but live off, we were very contemptuously called a nation which lived from ship to mouth. Ships laden with grain from the US, under the US PL Public Law 480 program. We didn't, when we got independence, we also got land which was not able to eke out food on its own. We had irrigation facilities which were non-existent. We had no fertilizer programs and all that. It was Nehru who started his top-down, program of building institutions, building dams everywhere. And so when you said that Punjab, benefited from the Green Revolution, there was only one reason for it. Punjab benefited simply because Punjab was able to support the Green Revolution, which was nothing more than water and fertilizer guzzlers. You needed extra water, you needed extra fertilizer, and Punjab, with its Bhakra Dam, was able to provide that kind of, the perfect solution to a scientific tryst which they were trying to deploy in the field. So it had met all the conditions. But 1960s India was a hungry time. And we were hungering not just for the fact that we didn't have food, but we didn't have solutions. We were dependent on the US for food aid, which also meant that they were able to control us with conditional diplomacy. Mrs. Gandhi, one day out of great frustration, turns to Professor Swaminathan and says that, Swami, I've been hearing about these magic seeds that you've got from Mexico, which you're planning to marry with the Indian wheat seeds to give us 3 times, the food production that we need. How soon can you give me 10 million tons? Because I want to get the bloody Americans off my back. The bloody American she wanted to get off her back was actually Lyndon B. Johnson's government, who had her literally by the toenails, making her jump with whatever they wanted, because we were getting the food from them. And if she made a statement against Vietnam or took a public policy stand or a political stand, we were punished. Our food imports were stopped at borders. Once, I think it was very close to Christmas, and we were waiting for the ships to come. And Mrs. Gandhi was, called up Lyndon B. Johnson and said, look, why haven't the ships arrived? He turned around and said that you made a speech which we don't agree with, so we've halted it over 300 knots away from Calcutta, the ports. And until you change your stance, we are not going to release it. She then finally didn't know what to do. She appealed to Lyndon B. Johnson's daughter, Mary Johnson, who turned around and told her father, what is wrong with you? This is the time of Christmas. It's a time of forgiveness and for family. You release the food. The grains have to go into port. So she bullied her father into it. That was the last straw which broke Mrs. Gandhi's back. She finally went back in January and told Swaminathan that, you need to make this work. I will support you, and my government will support you. And between the two of them, the Green Revolution, which actually broke 4,000 years of agricultural stagnation in India. We had so much wheat which we hadn't seen since the time of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, that was 4,000 years ago. He broke that wheat stagnation in 2 years, between 1966 and 1965 and 1967. And with food security came the very essential political stability. And that is why, even though we lost the wars, 1971, the liberation of Bangladesh was possible because Mrs. Gandhi didn't have to cleave or kneel in front of any government, especially in the US, to be told what to do for us. She turned around and said, we have our food secure. I don't need the Americans to tell me what to do. And food security then essentially led to political stability. And that, I think, was the greatest hinge on which India's fortunes turned.
You mentioned that he chose Punjab, and because there was the irrigation facilities had already been there because of the first 5-year plan.
Yes.
But wouldn't perhaps Bengal have been the more appropriate setting? Because you remember during the Second World War we had the Great Bengal Famine, for which we blame Churchill and all that. And you are referred to that Bengal famine in the book also.
The Bengal famine...
Shouldn't Bengal have been the more appropriate setting? I mean, why did he choose Punjab?
I think because Punjab, generally, don't forget, Prasannan sir, when we got independence, our most fertile lands went to Pakistan. There was a no-brainer. The partition took away, Punjab in the Pakistan area had the more fertile land. The Punjab in the Indian side of the border was fertile, but not as fertile as the lands which, had the 5 rivers feeding it in Pakistan, Punjab. And because we had the dam system, and he found, the seeds which were trial seeds were trial first in Punjab simply because of the willingness of the farmers. Elsewhere, farmers refused to trial the seeds. So had it been Bengal, it would have also been much further away from the Indian Agricultural Research Institute, which was in Delhi. So you needed to have geographical proximity to the main laboratory, which was at IIRI. So Punjab worked out very well, the Jaunty Seed Village. And yes, the Bengal famine truly was a time of change and catharsis in Professor Swaminathan's life, simply because the Bengal famine is what prevented him from becoming a doctor. He was training to be a doctor. When he saw the Bengal famine being unleashed, he chose to become an agricultural scientist, saying that for an agricultural country like India, not to be able to produce its own food, and for 3 million upwards of people dying, not because there was a climate crisis, not because we couldn't grow our grain, but because Winston Churchill didn't let us eat. All the grain was siphoned off to the troops which were fighting, in the Japanese front, the Myanmar front, for the Second World War. So he felt for a country like India, you didn't need another doctor. You actually needed an agricultural scientist who would make sure that this fate would never be faced by any more Indians again. So that was a turning point in his life.
Good. So B.G. Verghese, the eminent editor, the journalist, and also who was a press secretary to the Prime Minister Indira Gandhi at that time. So he has written in his autobiography, the first draft, that three South Indians, yes. That time, in fact, 3 Madrasis, that time, yeah, that used to be, that word used to be in currency, it's no longer there. So 3 Madrasis were responsible for the Green Revolution. One, of course, is Dr. Swaminathan himself. But then at the political level, you had Dr. C. Subramaniam, the agriculture minister. Then there was, of course, the agriculture secretary, Shivaraman, who was an Orissa cadre officer, but on Nehru's persuasion, he came to Delhi. I mean, Indira Gandhi's, or Shastri, I'm not sure.
It was Shastri first, then Mrs. Gandhi, yeah. Because he was seconded to Orissa.
Yeah.
And then he came to Delhi. Yeah. Now,
so these 3 Madrasis were responsible for the, the credit should go to them. How do you think that kind of, was it a sort of a destiny, or was it a historical confidence, coincidence that they came together like that?
I call it the Madrasi medley, because there were 3 very intrepid Tamilians. There was C. Subramaniam. I won't call them Tamil Brahmins, because C. Subramaniam and Professor Swaminathan were Tamil Brahmins, but B. Sivaraman wasn't.
Was not.
So there were these 3 intrepid Tamilians who actually rid India of food insecurity and food shortages, abject food shortages, to give us food security. I think it was the fact that these 3 moving parts fell together and worked really well. It was C. Subramaniam who did want to be agriculture minister. He had the more profitable steel portfolio. And then Lal Bahadur Shastri convinced him to take on agriculture. And probably that was the best thing that India could have done. Professor Swaminathan needed a friend in public policy, and C. Subramaniam was there. And incidentally, Prasannan sir, C. Subramaniam himself was a Bharat Ratna award. He got it in '98, but M.S. Swaminathan had to wait till he was gone, well after he was gone, to get the Bharat Ratna. B. Sivaraman was an officer who was seconded to Orissa, but had a very good work ethic and was actually cited first by Shastri, then by Mrs. Gandhi, and then by C. Subramaniam, who felt that he would be the best man for the job. So he was pulled out, and he was asked to join this team which was trying to unleash the Green Revolution. So I think it was a medley of happy coincidences of 3 very intrepid Madrasis.
Today, of course, your book, those who read your book today understand the context and all that, but or people who lived through that generation know, they understand the value of the Green Revolution and all. But at the same time, today, in the newer context, we also see a lot of criticism about the Green Revolution, having actually spoiled the fertility of the land, irrigation, dependence on chemical fertilizers, and actually, they say ruin the soil kind of thing. So how do you react to that sort of a...
Actually, I don't react to it in the sense, because I know it's true. What you're telling me is incredibly true. And in fact, it was Professor Swaminathan who very clearly said that, look, what I've created is a Frankenstein monster. But I had to do it because we were pinned with our backs to the walls, with Mrs. Gandhi crumbling, with India's political stability at great stake from the Americans. We had no choice. We were literally down to our last pennies, no food to eat. How long could we have continued? So he said, well, when the Green Revolution happened in 1968 at the Indian Science Congress in Varanasi in January, he turns around and says that, look, I'm aware that the Green Revolution is morphing into what he called the greed revolution, because you had the seeds, there was over salinity, fertilizers being introduced in such great amounts into the food chain also meant that, they were carcinogenic in nature, so they would percolate down. They were terrible water guzzlers, so the water table was overstretched, overpumped, and subsidies started coming in, which actually aggravated and exacerbated the problem. He says, if you're not careful, this is morphing very much into the Green Revolution, and I would really want to guard against that. So at that stage, he propagated something called the Evergreen Revolution, which was production in perpetuity without added ecological harm, which was the basis of his ecological crusades all his life. But he was probably the first person to look back into his own creation and feel that it was a short-termed creation. It was not meant to be for longer. And had it been for longer, it would have had to be suitably tweaked, curtailed, and re-engineered for a world where resources were tight and we were living on borrowed time.
In fact, I may just add, because he also wrote a 3-volume book on sustainable agriculture, which many people don't know about. I mean, those who blame him for what has happened in the Green Revolution in terms of the fertility of the soil or the health of the soil, as they say. He also thought about the Green Revolution, but then by then he was quite, I mean, aged into his senior years and all that. Maybe he could not work much on that. So that might have happened like that. But yeah, please.
I think the Green Revolution, he knew that he had created something which was not going to be sustainable in the long run, but he had also started working on things, farming methods which were sustainable. And he has, I mean, of course, he's been derided by people everywhere, by a huge section who feel that, you know, the Green Revolution was actually an act of agricultural harakiri in India. But he was the first one to point out that, look, this was short term and we have to move on. But public policy, you cannot just say that, look, I want to move on if there is no public policy support, which there wasn't. Mrs. Gandhi made sure the Green Revolution worked because we needed that political stability, and for that food security was essential. So she pulled every lever to make that work. For the Evergreen Revolution to work, every successive government would also have to pull their weight along, which they didn't. And as a result of which, we've not been able to have that kind of sustainable agriculture, which he dreamed of and which I think is the need of the hour. So there is still lots to be done.
In the book, you have mentioned him. You have described him very often as a Gandhian and as a Nehruvian who imbibed the Nehruvian values and all that. But at the same time, being such a Democrat and all that, how could he also work in the Philippines, which was ruled by a dictator like Marcos at that time? So he, I mean, that way he was comfortable in every sort of a political regime, yeah, so to speak, and all that.
Well, he was, you forget he was a diplomat. He was the, you know, the immaculate diplomat. He was, I think he's the best president we didn't have. He would have been fabulous. Well, he did work, I mean, his attraction towards working as the Director General of the International Rice Research Institute in Los Baños in Philippines was simply because he'd spent all his lifetime working on wheat. And he wanted to work on rice, which was a very important grain for Southeast Asia and also part of India as well. So that was too rich an opportunity to pass up. And also, I think by that stage, he was also very fed up of being in the Planning Commission and pushing pen and paper, not doing laboratory work and all that. And believe it or not, even though you say that he worked with the dictatorial government of Marcos, when Cory Aquino was coming to power, there was a 12-hour window when her revolutionaries were marching towards Manila, and the students of the International Rice Research Institute came and asked Professor Swaminathan, look, we want to march in solidarity, but we don't have buses to get to Manila. You have buses used by the International Rice Research Institute teachers, students to get to the schools. Can we please borrow your buses because we want to go and support her? He took a split-second decision knowing that his role as the Director General of a research institute was essentially non-political. But he said that I wanted to side with history and with what was right. So I told my bus drivers, go drop the students, make sure they're unharmed and quickly come back. The first thing Cory Aquino does when she comes to power is that tell him that, you've helped us so much, what can I do for you? She then went on to award him the Golden Heart Presidential Award, which is the highest non-civilian award for a non-Filipino to get. He was one of the very few Indians who's ever got it. I don't think any other Indian has got it ever since.
No.
So he was a consummate diplomat. He knew exactly what to be done. Don't forget, he's worked with every government from Pandit Nehru down to Prime Minister Modi. And he's not put one toe wrong. You can't do that if you don't have your political skill set sorted. And the fact that, he was absolutely, hugely diplomatic himself.
So, okay, thank you very much. It was a very enjoyable conversation.
Yes, it was, but I missed my earlier session. I think, yes, it was too late, yes. But no, a lot of people have left, actually. I think the interested crowd, because the social medias went out, I got stuck in the way. But thank you for listening, and thank you for having me. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.